Good evening, everybody. So I've got my dinner cooking, and I'm going to be putting together a string of dash cam footage. Covers about 2.5 hours of me driving through Atlanta. I want to see how many people spot the stupidity that happens in traffic in Atlanta. Atlanta is unique in its traffic patterns. But if you want to see a lot of bad driving, Atlanta's the place to go. Now, I know that this is going to turn out to be a little bit longer video, but basically, I wound up taking the wrong exit, which resulted in me taking a wrong turn. Then I wound up in rush hour traffic in downtown Atlanta, which is a first for me because trucks are usually forced to be on I-285 going around Atlanta. We're not typically allowed to go through Atlanta. Somehow I wound up there. Yeah, it got interesting. So, I'm just going to let the video talk for itself, and we'll go from there.
In 2.25 miles, exit right.
The political fragmentation of the post-Roman West also resulted in ecclesiastical fragmentation in Catholic territory, but it was only just emerging in the Southwest that it not yet culminated in complete isolation from the outside. The Armenian faith had been prohibited since 318, but gradually disappeared from the cities. It stubbornly persisted until the 6th century. Since the emperors recruited some of their soldiers from the Germanic kingdoms outside the empire, they were forced to tolerate in the army a confession that was prohibited in the sacraments. In the kingdoms that were founded on the territory of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century BC, the Homoousian confession still under royal protection and could flourish freely, but it was actively propagated only in exceptional circumstances for reasons of political expediency. That was because even in the Germanic kingdoms, a very similar image is found at an even earlier date in the baptistry of the Catholic Episcopal Church of Ravenna. By the fall of the Gothic kingdom, far more churches of the Homoousian community existed in and around Ravenna that have since vanished but are mentioned in the Liber Pontificalis Neos Ravenna. Unfortunately, information about how these buildings were financed is almost always accurate. In only one case is a Bishop Polybius mentioned as the sponsor. Even he would hardly have been able to muster the necessary resources, though, if Theodoric had not at least lent a hand. It was thanks to royal munificence that Ravenna was the only city in Gothic Italy in which the monumental presence of the Homoousian community was hardly inferior to that of the Catholic Church. The Church of Ravenna is also the only Homoousian community on the organization of which the sources shed some light. This is thanks primarily to a document drawn up in the year 551. In it, the entire clergy of the church, which calls itself the Gothic Church of St. Anastasia, Ecclesia Gothica Sancti Anastasia, or the Church of the Law of the Goths of St. Anastasia, Ecclesia Regis Ordorum Sancti Anastasia, cedes ownership of a pond or pool valued at 180 solidi to a man named Peter, who had leased it from the church for 120 solidi 16 years earlier, when the city was still the residence of the Gothic Christ of a human and a divine heart. Hence they argued that the Redeemer had only one human divine nature, Fusus, which is why modern scholars have called them monophysite, or modified sites. This controversy resonated with people from all walks of life and provoked violent unrest. Whole provinces threatened to slip from the Eastern Roman Empire's grasp. Zeno sought to restore the unity of the imperial church by having Cassius, patriarch of Constantinople, draft a formula that omitted the source of controversy, the Council of Chalcedon, and its decrees. The emperor hoped that would be accepted with the real majority of Christian authorities, especially bishops and Muslims. Felix III resolutely opposed this policy of reconciliation through compromise. The confrontation stemmed from a dispute over the succession to the Patriarchate of Alexandria, where in 482 the emperor installed Peter Mongus, who had previously been down as an opponent of the Council of Chalcedon. The Pope delegated the investigation of facts to bishops who enjoyed his trust. In many places in northern Italy, in contrast, the Bishop of Rome was denied the right to intercede. Around the year 300, there were 3 sees whose occupants exercised the power of a metropolitan. The oldest and most important of these bishoprics was Milan, in the province of Liguria, which was joined by
In
Aquileia,
1.5 miles, keep right.
and Ravenna, in the province of Emilia, around the middle of the 5th century. The metropolitans of Milan, Aquileia, and Ravenna consecrated bishops within their dioceses, and thus were in a position to exert a decisive influence on the election of bishops. The metropolitans of Milan and Aquileia were appointed to their offices without Rome's involvement, because they consecrated one another. The Church of Ravenna, in contrast, had close ties to Rome. Popes took action against the local bishop several times in the last quarter of the 5th century. As we have learned, the clergy of Ravenna subsequently appealed to Pope Felix IV to arbitrate a dispute over the usage of property. The Bishop of Rome also viewed himself as the champion of orthodoxy in Italy, and he kept vigilant watch to ensure his sheep did not stray from the correct faith. Of course, after 476, the popes could no longer ask for the emperor's help to force Christians who disagreed with the Catholic Church to abandon their error. When Pope Gelasius received news that the teachings of the theologian Pelagius were being condemned by Pope Innocent in 417, were being spread in Dalmatia and in the province of Picenum, he immediately wrote to Honorius, the Bishop of Salona, and ordered him to take action with the other bishops of Dalmatia against this dangerous heresy. Honorius bristled at this rebuke, however, declared that Gelasius had received false information, and demanded that the Pope name the slanderers. Gelasius rebuked the bishops of the province of Picenum for permitting a priest to spread Pelagian heresies there and go unpunished. The offenders supposedly claimed that man was born without sin and could achieve salvation on his own without divine aid. He was also accused of disparaging the memory of Augustine, who had advocated the anti-Pelagian doctrine that every person was implicated in original sin from birth, and therefore could be saved only by the grace of God. How the bishops reacted is not transmitted. Homoian Christians who were soldiers had been permitted to practice their religion under the emperors. They were even granted their own church in Rome under Emperor Anthemius, the latest. Pope Hilary, 461 to 468, was not at all pleased, but he could do nothing to prevent it, even though in 467 he reportedly wrested from Anthemius a promise not to grant request for separate churches for Christians of other confessions made by an otherwise unknown bishop, Eulothius. After the imperial monarchy disappeared in Italy, the popes had to be even more vigilant. Now it was no longer possible to fight the Arian heresy openly, because it was also the confession of the ruler of Italy. The Catholic Church had to be content to be left in peace. A glance at the kingdoms of the Visigoths and Vandals reveals why the Catholic bishops in Italy had good reason to be concerned. In southwestern Gaul, no fewer than 9 cities no longer had a bishop by 474, because King Euric had prevented the vacant seats from being filled. Sidonius Apollinaris, bishop of Clermont-Ferrand since 470, compared the situation to the Babylonian captivity of the people of Israel. Euric's successor, Alaric II, initially continued this containment policy. The situation in North Africa was even more disquieting. Violent attacks on Catholic churches and clerics had already broken out in the heart of the province of Africa Consularis, under King Geyser. Bishops were driven away and not permitted to be replaced. The king later ordered the surrender of liturgical instruments and sacred scriptures. Even a general ban on assemblies was issued. This persecution temporarily flagged, only to peak under King Honoric in 1794. In an edict dating February the 24th, 484, the king threatened those of his subjects who refused to convert to the Honorian creed with the same punishments that had been established for heretics in the Eastern Roman Empire. Thousands of clerics were deported or exiled. Many fled North Africa for Gaul or Italy. King Gunther Church, he wrote, "We urge your nobility evermore that it deign to abstain from ecclesiastical matters and affairs,
In 1¼ miles,
from
keep
all your
right.
agitation, and permit the rule of religion to be observed, especially since it is beyond doubt that you belong to another community of faith. And you should not interpose your person in matters that have nothing to do with you, or you will force us, as we said previously, to send a report and bring all these things to the attention of the Lord and King, my son. For since he himself, in his wisdom, in no way wants to stand in the way of ecclesiastical affairs, it is only fair that anyone who lives under his rule should imitate what the magnificent king himself does, so as not to appear to transgress his wishes." A sentence is quoted from a lost letter of Gelasius to Theodoric to the effect that if the king had decreed the laws of the Roman Empires would be observed in transactions of faith, then he most certainly would have wanted them to be observed in a reverential relationship with the king's. Theodoric indeed preserved all the tax and privileges of the Catholic Church. Churches retained their property and incomes, bishop remains and administration confused, and citizens continued to enjoy privileged jurisdiction. When two clergymen of the Church of England appealed against the bishop, he sent them back to the bishop
Keep
of Rome
right.
as soon as he learned that they were not labelled. In contrast to the kingdom of the magnetic Indians, Catholic clergymen had no reason to fear for themselves or their congregations' infirmity. They were even treated with deference. Obviously, they could not expect an Arian king to sponsor the construction of Catholic churches, nor could they hope to avail themselves of his aid in the fight for orthodoxy. But both the status of the church and the freedom to celebrate Mass were guaranteed. If they objectively assessed what was in their own interest, there was no alternative to cooperating with the heretical king of the Bible. The clergyman Herodius of Milan explicitly detailed the basis of this cooperation in a letter he wrote shortly after the annexation of Naples to Theodoric's kingdom. And these things are being prepared with heavenly aid as recompense for this, that our faith, as a safe harbor for him, although he himself finds something else. His tolerance, at the end of it, is striking, since, although he clings to his own conception of he does not dim against others. For even when the land holdings of our churches return to us, he groans if they had not been promised. So it has come about that the rich property of paupers keeps its status, and middling property robustly grows to extreme opulence. In priests, he both cultivates innate virtues and inspires those he does not find already there. Herodius praises Theodoric as a ruler who gives Catholics the freedom to practice their own religion, who protects the property of their churches, but who shows respect to their priests. At the same time, he suggests that this conduct was in no way self-evident, because Theodoric himself professed a different faith. Many, if not most, of the bishops entertained faith as well.
Keep
Gelasius
right.
immediately that he would stand up to him for Anastasius, only because this lay beyond his reach. Hence, a heretical, yet very tolerant king represented the lesser evil in comparison to an emperor who forcibly supported a heresy in his empire. This position could also be justified in theological terms, since, in contrast to Anastasius, Theodoric did not claim to belong to the church of which Gelasius considered himself the head. The Pope could take the position that he had no jurisdiction over the king. He was not responsible before God or mankind for Gelasius also considered it essentially commendable that Theodoric was willing to lend an ear to Catholic bishops. This virtue, however, was also a source of some concern for the vicar of St. Peter, because it opened the way for his fellow bishops to gain influence that might weaken his own authority. He thus took pains to control direct communication between Catholic bishops and the new order of Italy. When Bishop Elpidius of Volterra went to Ravenna without first obtaining permission from the representative of St. Peter, Gelasius issued a missharp appeal. No bishop was allowed to approach Theodoric's court without the king's permission. Theodoric worked to win the support of the Catholic bishops that he even during the civil war getting underway. Confrontation was not in his interest, and since the overwhelming majority days later, November 27, two successors were simultaneously released. Only a few while the majority of the Roman clergy
Now, before I go, there were 2 Easter eggs in that video. How many of you spotted the Google Tower and the homeless guy's tent? Let me know down in the comments. I'm just gonna let things roll over to Hershey.